At first it sounded like thunder, but it wasn't a storm, it was war. In just 12 minutes, Ukraine launched the largest drone assault ever attempted. 1,600 drones swarming Russia's skies. The targets? Not just oil depots, but command centers, fuel reserves, and even military barracks. And within hours, the world would learn just how devastating those drones had been. It was 3:14 a.m. when radar operators outside Moscow noticed a strange pattern. First one blip, then 10, then dozens. What they were watching wasn't a single wave. It was hundreds of drones, launched in carefully timed formations from across Ukraine. Each one carried only 20 kilograms of explosives, but their strength wasn't in payload, it was in numbers. Russia scrambled air defenses. Pantsir and S-400 batteries lit up the night sky, but the drones kept coming, wave after wave. By dawn, the damage reports told the truth. 4 oil depots destroyed, 2 more burning. 1 major command bunker obliterated. 32 fuel trucks and 5 helicopters gone. At least 60 Russian personnel killed. This wasn't harassment, this was a statement. Ukraine could strike Russia anywhere, at any hour. The biggest hit came at Belgorod Fuel Reserve number 6. One drone slipped past defenses and slammed into a central storage tank. Within seconds, 120,000 gallons of fuel erupted in fire. The blast wave shattered windows 6 kilometers away. Moscow's commanders were forced into chaos. Military convoys stalled for lack of fuel. Communications flickered as bunkers lost power. For the first time since the war began, Russia's own civilians saw flames rising not from Ukraine, but from their homeland. By noon, Moscow accused Kiev of crossing a red line, but Ukraine wasn't finished. In the afternoon, a second swarm hit Kursk and Voronezh, disabling air bases and leaving runways cratered. Meanwhile, the U.S. quietly stepped in. High above the Black Sea, an American RQ-180 stealth drone relayed targeting data directly to Ukrainian command. With precision coordinates, the strikes grew deadlier. A Russian S-400 site worth nearly $300 million was wiped out in under 90 seconds. Washington didn't claim responsibility, but the message was clear. Ukraine wasn't striking alone anymore. By nightfall, reports reached the Kremlin. 6 regions had been hit, millions of gallons of fuel gone, supply lines crippled. Putin now faced a nightmare: retaliate too hard and risk direct conflict with NATO. Do nothing and show the world that Russia's defenses were vulnerable. He called an emergency session. His generals demanded escalation, but his advisors warned, we cannot fight both Kyiv and Washington at once. The decision? A measured response. More missile strikes on Ukraine, but no move against American assets. The world watched in disbelief. Satellite images of burning depots spread across the internet. Energy markets panicked. Oil prices spiked $12 a barrel overnight. Europe braced for shortages. Asia scrambled to secure reserves. For Ukraine, though, this was victory beyond the battlefield. They hadn't just hit fuel tanks. They had struck Russia's sense of invulnerability. In total, Ukraine lost nearly 400 drones to Russian air defenses. But the sheer mass of the assault meant that 1,200 still broke through. The math is staggering. The entire swarm cost Ukraine about $60 million to build and launch. Russia's losses? Nearly $2.4 billion in destroyed assets, fuel reserves, radar stations, command bunkers, helicopters, and convoys. On paper, that's a 40-to-1 return on investment. But numbers alone can't capture the real impact. For the first time, Russian civilians in Belgorod, Kursk, and Voronezh woke not to morning traffic or church bells, but to the thunder of explosions in their own neighborhoods. Families huddled in basements. Children screamed as windows shattered miles away from the blast zones. Firefighters battled infernos with hoses that froze in the night air. Local hospitals overflowed, not with wounded soldiers, but with civilians injured by falling glass and collapsing walls. Russia's state media called it minor damage, but no propaganda could hide the columns of smoke rising into the sky or the endless videos posted online by ordinary Russians. For the first time, Moscow realized its heartland was no longer untouchable, and beyond Russia, the world was watching. In Washington, Pentagon analysts compared the attack to a Pearl Harbor in reverse. Not a superpower striking a smaller nation, but a smaller nation using ingenuity and persistence to bleed a giant. In Europe, leaders called emergency energy meetings. Oil prices had spiked nearly $12 per barrel overnight, a surge that threatened to ripple through economies still struggling with inflation. In Beijing and Tehran, military planners took notes. If a nation with limited resources could cripple Russia's infrastructure using cheap, expendable drones, what did that mean for their own defenses against future conflicts? Even NATO allies, impressed as they were, whispered behind closed doors, "If Ukraine can do this, what happens if these tactics spread? What happens if swarms like this appear over Western cities one day?" Inside Russia, the psychological blow cut even deeper. For years, the Kremlin promised its people that the special military operation would never touch them, that Russia was too vast, too strong, too defended for war to reach their doorsteps. That illusion shattered in a single night. In Belgorod, entire fuel depots were reduced to flaming craters. In Kursk, residents saw military convoys burning on the side of highways they drove every day. In Voronezh, parents pulled their children from schools as rumors spread of more drones coming. The war was no longer distant, it was now personal, and perhaps most important of all, the world saw something unprecedented, that even a smaller nation, backed by clever engineering and determined allies, could pierce the armor of a so-called superpower. This wasn't just Ukraine's strike, it was a proof of concept, a glimpse into the future of warfare, where swarms of cheap, intelligent drones could overwhelm even the most expensive defenses. For Russia, it was humiliation. For Ukraine, vindication. For the rest of the world, a warning. So here's the question we must all ask. Was this just Ukraine's boldest strike yet, an isolated act of defiance? Or was it the opening chapter in a much more dangerous phase of the war? Because if Ukraine can deliver billions in damage using drones that cost a fraction of Russia's missiles, what happens when the United States and its allies unleash their full arsenal of stealth bombers, cruise missiles, and cyber weapons into the fight? Will Russia escalate further? Will NATO be dragged into open conflict? Or will this be remembered as the moment the tide of war turned against Moscow for good? One thing is certain, the war has entered a new era, and from this day forward, the skies above Russia will never feel safe again.